not 100% sure how many people will actually click on this video due to its title, but here we are. I usually see a lot of people like to copy setups from places like SoDialed and Petit RC. Usually these setups are from higher level pros, people who really know how to make a car go fast. However, a lot of people who aren't really fast end up copying these setups and don't feel like they get the success that they need. It is important to note, however, that setting up a fast car is very different than setting up a very easy car, and that's what we're going to be exploring in this video. Specifically, how to make a car easier to drive for a slower driver. It's important to note that I'll mainly be talking about 8th scale in this video, as that's what I have the most prior experience with at this point. However, I will mention 10th scale where applicable. I'd also like to thank the sponsors of this video, A-Main Hobbies, Cal RC, and Peach State Hobbies. Anything you guys purchase using the links in the description below will directly support me as well. Let's begin.
Let's begin with some hardware settings you can do to your car that can make things a bit easier to drive. Rear tow is something that you'll definitely see a lot less skilled drivers and skilled drivers use very differently. Usually you'll see pro level drivers run a little bit less towing in the rear to get the car to rotate as quickly as possible and generate as much speed as possible. Less skilled drivers usually run more towing in the rear to get the car to gain more rear traction coming out of a corner, as usually less skilled drivers have less throttle control, a point we'll get to later. In 8th scale racing, how much towing in the rear that you run can also depend on how much traction you have overall. On a looser, very little grip track, you'll want to run a little bit more towing to make the car easier to handle coming out of a corner. On higher grip tracks, you can get away with a lot less towing to get the car to rotate better, as the track itself will generate as much traction as you need.
So how much rear towing should I run? Well, on a medium to, let's say about a high grip track, in the summer specifically here in the United States, the rear tow you'll want to be running will be somewhere between 3.5 degrees of tow in and 2 degrees of tow in. However you adjust your towing can vary depending on which car you have. For example, on my Maico MX-8E and on the HB E8 World Edition, you need to use different C&D blocks to change your tow. However, on different cars like the Agama N1E that I have, and most other cars like the B4E, the Technos, and other cars of such, you usually use something called a pill system where you can adjust your kick-up, tow-in, and anti-squat all using those pills. I personally run 2.25 degrees of tow-in on most tracks that I go to, including big race time events to more high grip situations. I usually tune out how much grip I actually have using tires.
Tires are by far the most important part of your car setup. If your tires are not suited to the track at hand, your car simply won't drive well. I made a whole video talking about tire types and choice a little while ago, so if you want more info on what tire to use, be sure to check out that video. Thing is though, sometimes what tire you choose can actually depend on your skill level as well. If the track is developing a groove but still has a dusty layer outside the line, what tire you choose will depend on whether or not you can actually stay in that line consistently. If you can, then running a more aggressive dense pin style tire like this, or even a bar tire like this, will be faster. But the moment you exit the line, you will be punished for it. Meanwhile, a less aggressive pin style tire like this will be much more forgiving, but will be a bit slower. Of course, there's a limit to this. You don't want to run a pin style tire on a black groove track with no dust, but on a normal club race day, a black groove usually doesn't happen, so running a pin style tire is usually a safe bet still. The next thing I'd like to talk about is, well, the car you plan to drive. Different brands of cars have different driving characteristics even when set up differently. I can tell you from experience that the Maico MX-8E is an extremely easy car to drive out of the box, even though it sacrifices a little bit in terms of pure speed. In fact, pretty much all C-Hub cars are extremely easy to drive, as by nature, they tend to drive from the front rather than the rear like a pillowball car. What I mean in layman's terms is that a C-Hub car will act more like it has all-wheel drive, but the majority of the control will come from the front wheels, like a front-wheel drive car. In the other hand, a pillowball car will drive like the rear has more control over how the car drives, like a rear-wheel drive car. If you're into full-size car racing, or perhaps just know about how cars drive, front-wheel drive cars are much easier to control than rear-wheel drive cars. Think of it like dealing with a 300 horsepower Focus ST compared to a 300 horsepower BMW M3. Both of them have the same power, but one is much more benign and safe to drive quickly compared to the other. Of course, you can change how these cars drive with different setups, but generally speaking, this is how each suspension system behaves. So which of these cars are easy to drive, and which one should you want to look for when buying a race vehicle? Well, like I said, the majority of C-Hub cars are good options, with the Tekno EB48 2.2, Mayako MX-8E, and Kyosho MP10E or MP11 being the easiest of them. Pillball cars, on the other hand, are a bit more tricky to recommend due to their more aggressive nature. The ones that I've personally driven and had an easy time with were the S-Works S35 4E Evo and the X-Ray XB8E, with a little bit of Mugen sprinkled in there too. If given the opportunity, be sure to try as many cars as you can to find one that you can gel with. Once you do, it's really important to stick with that platform and learn with it, as jumping brands every year or every few months isn't going to help you.
Little bonus at the end of this section of physical hardware tips for slower drivers is which class you run. Buggies are by and large a little bit harder to drive than their bigger truggy counterparts. Because of this, if you're a complete beginner or novice and want an idea of how to just drive a car normally, going with the truggy may be a better option if you have the cash to spend.
Next up, we have the software side of things. What I mean by software is anything that can be changed on a car without touching it, so to speak. ESC and controller settings, for example. The first setting, and probably most important one, is the amount of throttle you have. Depending on your gearing, motor KV, and track size, you probably won't need to run max power. In fact, running a max power 2200 kV motor is only usually the play when it comes to very large arena style races like P&B or Wicked Weekend, and even then only for more skilled drivers. When you're more skilled and have more throttle control, you're able to use that throttle control to make sure that they don't overpower the tires' grip and cause them to spin. I personally started using only about 80 to 85% of throttle on my 1900 kV motor, and I still have plenty of power to clear all the jumps on this track. That's with no boost timing or turbo timing. I just have more forgiveness in the throttle than I did before switching to lower power. Going back to full-size car analogies again, think of it like putting a novice in a 500 horsepower Mustang compared to putting them in a spec Miata or GR86. Even though the Mustang is faster machine base-wise, most drivers will be faster with the 86 or Miata around the track because they don't have too much power to be unwieldy. This also extends to steering speed. This is something you can adjust both in your steering servo and some transmitters. For the sake of this video, we'll be using the transmitter settings on this Noble NB4 Plus. On your Noble NB4 Plus, go to the second page on the default menu and pick channel speed. Then pick channel 1, which is your steering. You'll then be shown two settings, turn speed and return speed. Turn speed relates to how fast the steering servo moves to full lock from center, and return speed relates to how fast the servo will return to center from full lock. The idea of slowing down the steering of your car, or at least the turn speed, is to give more time for the front wheels to gain traction in a corner. Again, going back to a full-size car, you usually don't turn the wheel to full lock instantly when turning, even on a track or in this case a rally stage. You turn the wheel quickly but still smoothly, again in order for the front wheels to gain traction. Ever feel like your car has understeer and the front wheels are just pushing along the ground and not turning the car? Slowing down your steering or your inputs or artificially using the speed on your transmitter or servo will help fix this. Some higher level drivers will even purposely use high torque servos and not high speed ones to make their cars easier to drive.
At the end of the day, the majority of these settings are there to reduce the input speed of the actual buggy to make it easier to drive. Even though these things will make your car slower, more or less, it will allow you to practice on things that actually matter in racing, like your lines, your landing, your aerial control, and other things I mentioned in this video here. Thing is though, all of these settings can be reversed. As time goes on, you feel like you can be faster in certain sections by having a little bit more speed in one section or maybe a little bit more rotation in another section. You can change those things. Want a little bit more rotation? Reduce the amount of towing you have at the rear. Want a little bit more speed? Just up the input speed that you have on your transmitter or your ESC. It's all part of the learning process. Yes, you can start with a very fast car that's very difficult to drive, but like I said, very fast, but that can be very frustrating very quickly. Starting out with a slow car and progressively making it faster with yourself will make that learning curve a lot easier and a lot more bearable. Trust me.
Now, as you guys may have seen, I recently hit 10,000 subscribers. To celebrate this, I'm going to be doing a celebration stream where many riches can be had for those in attendance, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Also, if you're new here and haven't subscribed to the channel, be sure to do so by hitting the sub button below. Doesn't cost a thing and helps me out a lot. If you want to support me further, be sure to check out my channel member section of the sub button or become a patron via the link in the description below. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank my active patrons Michael Williams, RC World Discord server, Dave Armstrong, Rob Bedingfield, Caden Mertz, Ian Petrie, Jeffrey Kunz, Shane T. Ruth, Gable Barber, Freeman Racing Team, Chewy RC, and my channel members, Jeffrey Kunz again, Ralisk86, Claymore RC, Brian G, and especially Morrison Watt. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.